Yeah, so I'm going to talk, I'm going to range across some technology, a bit of science, a bit of philosophy, and talk about what I've done in the last 20 years of ClueCon, and then what I think is going to happen in the future. I should point out that I'm going to spend 1.5 minutes talking about the past, and the rest of it talking about the future. So just in case we're not going to do a sort of history lesson. Of course, predicting the future is very difficult, or predictions are very difficult, especially about the future. But I have some track record in being reasonably successful. So a very long time ago, 35 years ago or so, I invented the first planar through-glass touchscreen. And that, well, that won, right? So that's what's on every mobile phone, or every cash register, or any gas pump. It's almost everywhere. It has, I don't know, 80% market share. The rest of it is resistive, and I jokingly tell people, well, if it's working, it's mine. And if it's not working, it's somebody else's, because it's resistive, and a blade or a fingernail or whatever will scratch it, and it ends its life. But it's not obvious when I did it that was going to be successful. So for the first 15 years, the only place that used it was Las Vegas for gambling. Right? And I'm not terribly pro-gambling, so it's kind of rather disappointing when you invent something cool and it gets used for, vice or whatever. What we thought was going to happen, of course, was that voice was going to win. So we thought Drag and Dictate was going to win, and touchscreens were going to be relegated to some sort of also ran. And at the time, BlackBerry was this amazing thing. And people would tell me that if we took the keyboard away, it would destroy the fabric of society, because kids wouldn't be able to text each other under the table in classrooms anymore, and traders wouldn't be able to text while they're in a meeting and trade stocks, and the world would end. But today, we ship about 2.4 billion touchscreens a year. So it kind of worked out. I sold that out, and I started a company called Truphone. So Truphone made the first VoIP call on a mobile phone. So in 2007, we made the first VoIP call on an iPhone. And about now, we're getting to the point where more calls will be made over the top using VoIP than with the sort of native dialer in the phone. So that's also, kind of come out right, which is good. So what am I working on next? Well, my major job at the moment is I'm the chief architect of World Mobile. And World Mobile is building a sharing economy network. Now, the classic problem with building a mobile network is it's astonishingly expensive. So we reckon that if you wanted to start a mobile network in the USA the old-fashioned way, you would need about $50 billion. You assume that most of the money is you've got to build towers and radios and all that stuff. No, that's not true. The majority of that money, 60%, is spent acquiring the customers. So acquiring customers is extremely difficult to do. So we are building a community network, a community-run network. And that solves both the customer acquisition and the capital infrastructure deployment problem. So let me just give you the story. So we have a partner who is in Leavenworth, which is in Washington State. They have a Bavarian town. I don't know how many Bavarian towns you have in America, but they have a Bavarian town in America. And what happened is it was a typical one of these propositions on the tax, and they decided that we're going to cut school funding by 10% because people didn't want to spend any more money on their property tax. So they cut the funding, and so all of the kids are sitting there going, right, well, we'll either stop doing sport, music, art, all of the things that we love doing, or we'll become entrepreneurs. They decided to become entrepreneurs. They've started a charity, and they've decided to sell cellular service. So kids and their parents put up the equipment, and they hide it behind this beautiful kind of facade, and they build the network out. People donate their rooftops to the system, because obviously the money that comes in goes to the school, and so on. So it's a completely charity community built network, and then customer service is done in the shop, right? You can go into one of these shops and say, my phone's not working, and someone will go, let me help you, right? It'll often be the kid who is the son, daughter of the shop owner who will come out and say, let me fix your iPhone or Android. So it's completely community run, so it's quite novel in that way. It's all built around the blockchain, so we take the money in from the customers, so we actually print the bills, because we according to the US law, you have to have a person who provides the fundamental service, and there are all sorts of regulatory obligations, a long list of them. So we do all of that stuff that is very difficult to kind of get right, but the community sell the service, support the service, it's all them. And then the blockchain automatically shares the revenue amongst people. Now, one of the things that I've been working on, though, of course, is, again, customer service. When you acquire a customer, you have to talk to them. You have to talk through them. So even if we have lots of local people helping us, we need something to back them up. And our first port of call is AI, an AI agent, right, that knows all about our product, that can answer questions in a sophisticated way, not in a fairly dumb IVR way. So I've built a system based around SignalWire. The cool thing about it is that it's full 3D. So I've got a loop through Unreal Engine, so I can do full 3D avatars and so on. So I can walk around Leavenworth, its digital twin, and introduce you to the right shops, and support you completely with this avatar proposal. I'm not going to cut over to the actual live demo until we get to questions, because it'll break, the flow of the presentation. But some of you heard on Monday Napoleon, which is my kind of slightly joking version of the AI agent, but we also have a full agent. And that project in its own right will be a project in its own right, because we have a People of the World project, which is essentially putting all of those AI agents onto the blockchain and making a fair AI blockchain-based system built around SignalWire and LLMs and so on. So I've talked over the years about whether human beings are computers or computers are human beings. Are we equivalent to each other? And that's the sort of the big question for androids, which is, do androids dream? Do androids make VoIP calls to each other and talk to each other? Do they have personalities? Are we equivalent? So we look at Moore's law. I did this graph. This is off a presentation I gave here in 2010, so like 14 years ago. And my prediction at the time is that there are 3 inflection points that we might have. And you'll see my dates are way out, right? So the first inflection point is the point at which computers become as powerful as our brain in terms of gate count, which I estimated about 2053. It looks like NVIDIA piling a ton of GPUs into data centers has brought that forward by maybe a decade or more. The second one is, if our brains are quantum, then we would need to build a quantum computer with sufficient power. And I thought that was in the 2080 realm. Again, I think that's probably now 15 years out, maybe even earlier. And then the final question is, even if you have a quantum computer, is the brain something more powerful than a quantum computer? And you might know that there's a proposal by Roger Penrose, Stuart Hameroff, that human brains think and human thought is not a computation. And Penrose proposes that there's a problem in quantum mechanics, which is the measurement problem. And if you solve the measurement problem, you get some new physics. If you have new physics, you could use that new physics to explain how our brains work. And our brains are not computers. They're some sort of non-computational entity. This is based originally on an idea from Kurt Gödel. So beginning of the last century, we had 3 big discoveries, right? Relativity, quantum mechanics, and computational theory. And everyone knows about relativity and quantum mechanics, and basically people forget about computational theory. It was Gödel and Turing. And what Gödel basically said is, if you have a set of axioms at any one time in space, so you have Peano arithmetic, you've discovered Peano arithmetic, and you want to solve certain other problems, like Goodstein's theorem. Goodstein's theorem you can't solve with Peano arithmetic. You need additional axioms. And what Gödel's incompleteness theorem says, there is no machine that can find those algorithms. Those axioms. The only people that can find those axioms, or thing that can find those axioms, is us. We can find those axioms, but there is no mechanical procedure to do so. So that's the fundamental thing that Gödel and Turing were saying. And there's you can go through the scientific community, and there's a bunch of people who think that that's bunk, and a bunch of people who think that that might be true. And I can list it for each of the famous physicists for you, but we're going to assume that it might be true. So it's all around this idea that you have collapse of the wave function, so that when you look at if you take a photon and you split it in two, then when you observe it, it collapses one way or another. That's Schrödinger's cat, if you know that. So during COVID, I found myself in between visas. So my O visa ran out and my green card hadn't arrived. So the only thing that I could legitimately do was sit there and do some basic fundamental physics research, which is completely allowed. And so I built a quantum gravity computer in my garage. So this is a single gate quantum gravity computer. And obviously I had to make sure my kids were safe, so they all wore laser glasses. And the idea is that, and we'll get in a moment why this is profound to communication. So bear with me. You're going, oh, this is physics. Yeah, everything you do with communications is physics. So probably you all know the double slit experiment. You put a lamp through two slits, and it produces this interference pattern. And that's because light has a wave function, a wave characteristic. And when they add up, you get bright. And when they don't add up, you get dark, and you get this bright and dark pattern. And so we proposed a thought experiment. Let's imagine that we have two shutters, and that we can shut one of the shutters, and we'll just get a single beam. And we can shut the other shutter and get a single beam. If we try and look at the beams, you get two single beams because you lose the interference pattern. So we then said, okay, well, let's say we have a photon and we bring it through a half silvered mirror, a prism, and we'll split it in two. And that photon will be detected by two detectors, and two little motors will open the shutters. And if they both open, you'll get the interference pattern, and if only one shutter opens, you'll get a single slit. And it will be 50-50 in one way and 50-50 in the other way. So the question then is, what happens? So there's two possibilities. One is, you never see an interference pattern. You only ever see it go one way or the other. And the second possibility is you see an interference pattern for a brief period of time, and then according to Penrose, it collapses because of the gravitational field. Right, so we're looking for interference for a brief period of time before we see it. And so we built an experiment, and we do see interference for a brief period of time before the experiment, about 1 microsecond. So this is quite a disturbing result. And the reason it's a disturbing result is for some fundamental physics questions. We're now back in signaling. So if you can do this, what you can do is you can build two of my experiments, and you can put them on opposite sides of the room or on opposite sides of the universe as you feel. And then I can run the experiments. I can take a photon and I can split it in two and run the experiment, right, with a superposed photon. But the thing is, if I measure the experiment over here and it collapses, this one will collapse at the same time. That's spooky action at a distance. I will get instantaneous collapse of this experiment caused by this experiment. Now, if you know John Bell, this is not going to transmit information. The fact that he is the opposite of him, right? I can, at the speed of light, grab his piece of paper and walk to you and say, oh, you're the opposite of him, but the information had to travel, I had to walk, or get in a fast spaceship and and travel at the speed of light. It can't actually transmit information. But if gravitational collapse works, you can make a quantum Morse machine. So you can actually increase or decrease the mass of your measurement, and that will cause the collapse to happen faster or slower. And then you can look at the collapse time and go, oh, there's a signal there. So you've made a quantum Morse machine, and you're transmitting information faster than the speed of light. So some people look at that and say, therefore Penrose must be wrong, because if you can transmit faster than the speed of light, you've broken a fundamental law of physics and you're toast. And the other people say, well, you can transmit information faster than the speed of light. you know. We got to this point, and I Skyped my collaborator and said, I've just invented the subspace relay, right? Fast and speed of light communication. If this works, it will do it. The other real big problem with fast, okay, so that's a problem in its own right, okay? Might work, might not work. Why are people so against fast and light signaling? It's because if you can transmit information faster than the speed of light, you lose causality in the universe. So in special relativity, what the speed of light gives you is that although nothing is simultaneous, you never get any causality problems because you have to walk across the room at the speed of light and show the other person your result. And by the time you get there, all the causality has sorted itself out. You never get a position where you send information before the other person. In a universe where you can break the speed of light, if he's in a spaceship and he's in a spaceship traveling at different speeds, they can send signals to each other, and the signals will not be causal. Sometimes, for one frame of reference, it'll be before, and the other frame of reference, it will be after. And you can use that before-after to send information back in time. So sending back information back in time, we've all watched Star Trek. It's very easy. You just go around the sun, really, really fast, and you do a slingshot, and and Spock calculates it in his head, and you're done. But it was calculated a long time ago that you can build closed time-like curves, and if you build a closed time-like curve, then you could then that's a way of exceeding the Turing limit and computing above the limit. So by a long process of things, if Roger is right and collapse is caused by gravity, then in principle you could transmit information faster than the speed of light, which according to Deutsch means you get closed time-like curves, which will compute faster than a Turing machine, or in a different way to a Turing machine. So you get a different class of machine allowed. So this is my kind of evening job. What that would mean is that you ought to, if you want to get to the end of this sort of AI, AGI, ASI, that artificial superintelligence and so on, if you want to get to the end of that hierarchy, you're going to need to build something that's got, at the moment, living tissue in it, because the only way we know to make a scalable quantum gravity computer, if such a thing exists, is by copying our brain. And later you might be able to build some sort of silicon solution to it. What other things can you do with this? The interesting thing that we've been building is quantum MIMO antennas. So we transmit signals from two antennas, and the first person to receive collapses the wave function because they observe it, and then the person behind them doesn't see superposition. So that means you can build a cellular network, with hard edge cells. You can harden the cell as much as you like. So if you have, two antennas, you get, 3 dB increase in the cell edge, and you can just, increase it until you get a, almost brick wall cell edge. So that's what we're building practically, because that's the fastest thing you can build with this technique. And just in case you think I've gone into kind of complete, theory land, and the most interesting or wacky things you can do, and people are doing this with these effects, is to actually transmit information using the gravitational field. So you've got 4 fields available to you to signal with, right? So you've got the electromagnetic field, you've got the gravitational field, the strong field, and the weak field. And the strong and the weak field are only really present inside atoms. So they're not terribly useful for communicating between human beings. There might be some other being that would use them, but not us. But you can communicate with electromagnetics, and you can communicate with gravitational. The way that you communicate with a gravitational field is you build a laser-based fusion reactor. And when the laser-based fusion reactor fires, the lasers that hit the containment point put so much energy into space-time that they bend space-time. And that's a sufficient bend of space-time that something like LIGO could measure it. So the equivalent to a microwave oven for gravitational signaling is fusion reactors. So fusion reactors are going to be the annoying microwave oven that's giving off, radiation that disturbs our view. And so there are people looking at using gravitational waves to sense things today, right? We already use gravitation to find oil fields. So you fly an aeroplane over the land with a very sensitive gravitational field detector, and as it sees the undulations, it can see pockets in the earth, because rock is more dense than oil, and you get a gravitational map of the earth. You say, right, drill there, that's probably a good place to go. But you can also sense gravitational waves using a variety of different systems, and use that as a way of sensing things. So instead of looking for the electromagnetic spectrum, signature of something, if you're looking, whatever, you look for its gravitational wave signature. And so there are projects working on this today. So that's my quick round of what I did, what I've been doing, and various things. I have a book which you can all read about the general ideas of quantum mechanics and relativity and how they play together and how that might make the brain work. And I will be doing a future book called The Future of the Human Brain in the future. So, questions?
A future book in the future.
21 minutes and 40 seconds.
You're doing very well, James. Okay.
I had a bet with, it's right on, right?
We do have an opportunity for some questions. Has anybody got a question they would like to ask James? Yes, Daniel. I will bring the microphone to you.
Thank you, James. Yeah, with all this futuristic stuff, are we going in the right direction of evolution, or where you'll see will be the biggest impact, like for human as normal people, not for this supercomputer? Is going to change anything for us, or is just for the like Facebook to compute more and more information that benefits them, not us, let's say?
Yeah, so that's why I started a project quite a long time ago called SEN, and that is a sort of fair AI system, where if you have knowledge of a particular area, you put that into the knowledge base, and then when the AI accesses that knowledge and serves it up to people, it pays you some money for it, because it's your information that they've paid. At the moment, the algorithm is, if you're as big as the New York Times, you sue OpenAI, and they pay you some undisclosed amount of money per year. But if it's you or I, we're unlikely to be able to sue OpenAI. So that's a project that I started that went into deep sleep during COVID. I originally moved it to India, and then COVID hit India, and we just basically had to shut it down. But I keep thinking I might restart it, and that would be a really good way of encoding human knowledge to give us a benefit. I mean, ethically speaking, all the big AI companies at the moment are going, full out for AGI, and most people in the scientific community think that there's no difference between a machine and us. And so in some amount of time, between 3 years if you're Ray Kurzweil, and 20 years if you're, in science, 20 years is infinity, right? Somewhere between 3 and 20 years, they will have beings at Facebook and so on that will be equivalent to us. Now,
did that answer your question, Daniel? Daniel considers it answered. Okay, over to Jack.
Okay, so at a completely different scale from this really good question, I'm doing lab planning. So I've already got my AI stuff. I've got my GPUs and my TPUs in my like home lab. So could you go back to your lab picture? What do I need to get from my lab to do this?
Which lab would you like?
The one with the kids in the sunglasses.
Ah, the kids in the sunglasses. Okay, so the cheap version is this. Obviously, the one that I've got now in my garage is much more beautiful than this. But this is the very first one where we got a result from. So that's just a beam splitter and a Mach Zender. So,
Okay.
yeah. Now, what you actually then need to do is to scale that up.
Well, I might not do that, but I might do something like that.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, question from Tony.
Yeah, so I'm already thinking about the quantum jitter buffer. So if we send data faster than light and the observer isn't going at light speed, there's a chance that it's even more lagged, right? Because the data time will go slower for the data than it does for the person receiving it.
Oh, yes. Yeah, simultaneity and velocity and so on are all relative.
So, yeah, it's just been another fun thing to think about.
Yep.
Amazing. Amazing. Any more questions for young James Tagg? Or should I say young-looking James Tagg? Okay, let's give James Tagg a big ClueCon round of applause, please.